Hello, welcome to another episode of our podcast. Our guest today, all the way from not so frosty Finland, is McNerney of Grave Pleasures and Hexvessel. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
Let's begin with formal stuff. What's the current status of Grave Pleasures and Death Trip?
Great Pleasures is kind of on a break. We're all busy doing different things. So most notably, Juho, the guitarist, he's working with Oranssi Pazuzu, is his main project, and so they're touring a lot and doing a lot of live stuff. So we knew that for this year and maybe next year we'd also be, he has to give his main priority to that. I have Hexvessel ongoing and always busy with a lot of different projects. So we just took a break. We were very active for a while, and it's been good to have a break from that. The Death Trip, we are working on another album, but it's just taking time. It's a little different from the last album, so it takes a different approach with the vocals and lyrics, and so it's going to find its place in the order of things at some point, maybe next year.
Okay. By the way, I loved Playboys, and especially I loved Lead Balloons. I was wondering whether similarity, the melodic similarity with "Ordinary World" by Duran Duran was done on purpose.
Yeah, I guess that's a big influence because that's the music I grew up with. It's like my older sisters introduced me to a lot of that stuff during the 80s that they would be listening to at home. So Duran Duran was a very big thing. But there's a lot of different. I mean, it's a nod to 99 Red Balloons and stuff like that. So there was a lot of that Cold War kind of nuclear paranoia coming into the pop music as well at that time. So there's a lot of those different influences there. It wasn't like I specifically wanted to write a song like that Duran Duran song. I hadn't thought about it, but to me it was very 80s inspired.
Yeah, a lot of metalheads seem to have a sweet tooth for Duran Duran.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have an age group, that was the music we were listening to a lot when we were young. It's a weird thing that a lot of like metal guys get into kind of the 70s aesthetic, but not very many of my age group were actually born and remember the 70s. I was born in 78, so I have no memory of 70s. It has no meaning for me. It's 80s that was my decade.
Yeah, same for me because I was born in 1984, but we got all the stuff from the West later than the West had it.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
bit. Okay, I know it's not actual news, but why did you make that stylistic change with Hexvessel on the previous album?
We'd always talked about it. It had been kind of part of the plan, but we never wanted to do it like in a contrived way and just suddenly make a decision. It was more about what felt right with the music, and I think it came out of a period where the lineup changed yet again, and it just came into being in a kind of very natural way that I started creating this record, and it wasn't until it sort of formulated that I understood that this is still a Hexvessel record. It's just in coming from another angle, and if you listen to the beginning of the band from Dawnbearer, it was folk music, but it's written from a kind of metal perspective in that the chords and the structures are very black metal influenced. There's a lot of black metal chords throughout Dawnbearer, and I think someone described it at the time as kind of black metal folk because it had a lot of that influence there and a lot of the occult themes, obviously, and the imagery and everything. So I think that Hexvessel has always been. I think that's what's attracted the metal crowd to the band is the fact that they can hear the kind of subtext of the sort of like subliminal black metal influences that have been underneath. And now it's almost like we kind of flipped it, and there's a lot of folk influence in the black metal, kind of the black metal sound, but it's definitely still a very distinct Hexvessel sound. I think it's just that it's kind of wearing its influences on the outside rather than the inside. And I think it's just I've always wanted to do this because I always wanted to make kind of bring the message into the foreground, that you can kind of dress it up any way you want, but Hexvessel's message remains the same. So that was the idea.
Well, in a couple of interviews, you've stated that Polar Veil sounds just as you think black metal should sound. Does it apply to Nocturne as well?
Yeah, I think this is my take on it, as kind of like as complete as I can, based on what I think it's all about. And so I give my shot at that. Now I've been part of other people's sort of projects. When you think about Dodheim's Garden Code, even though I was a founder of Code, it still was very much Andy McIver's project. So I now I have my chance for me to show my my perspective on it, on what I think it's all about. So I think these two records are kind of a statement about that, in some ways.
Well, you kind of touched the topic already, but what was the feedback among the Hexvessel's crowd when the stylistic shift happened? Did you get new crowd, or did you lose some of your previous crowd?
I don't think I've really read anything about losing anyone, because, like I said, we've always had this kind of metal audience anyway. I think there was a period where, when we were doing the psychedelic rock thing, and a lot of there was a kind of buzz around that genre. In certain cities, in certain places, we were getting a very different kind of crowd than usual. So then we would start to see a lot of, I don't want to, put them down, but I would see a lot more hip people coming, like kind of, who I don't think they were really Hexvessel fans. I think they were more like, we were part of a movement, so they come and see it. We were playing with Jess and the Ancient Ones, I think, and that was a very big gig in Helsinki. We sold out a very big venue together, but I think that was a crowd who were there kind of for the combined experience of it. So to cut a long story short, I think we've always had this very core metal audience who enjoyed Hexvessel, but came along for the ride. I think they'd followed me from my different projects. They were a fan of my music, kind of whatever I'm doing, and they sort of traveled quite far with us in this exploration of sound and music that Hexvessel has been. But I think when Polar Veil came along, it was kind of the main reaction. I think the biggest reaction was, oh, thank you, like, finally you're doing something which isn't just something I'm interested in. This is something I'm invested in. So I think Hexvessel had been of interest and enjoyment for a big crowd, but I think when Polar Veil came, it kind of sealed the deal, if you like. Kind of it brought a lot of people home in a good way. So the general reaction I got was just of, like, thankfulness, gratefulness. People were like, oh, this is something I never knew I wanted, but now I got it. I'm really happy with it. That kind of feeling. And that's kind of what I thought, because I know the crowd really well, and I'm kind of, the fans are just like me, they would be, because it's very personal music. So I kind of got the feeling that this change in direction is not a change in direction for me. It's more like a homecoming, if you like, or kind of owning up to what was always inside,
Well, there's this theory that your surroundings, like environment you live in, affects the music you create. So let's say, I don't know, Celtic folk music is more upbeat than, for example, Scandinavian folk music, right? And I was wondering whether moving to Finland affected your creative output in any way.
Yeah, because when you have when you think about your fantasy world or your world of creation, your the world of inspiration, that doesn't necessarily you don't necessarily live there. You just it's just somewhere that you go to get a sense and to become creative. But for me, it was like I was always searching for that place where I could unite my creative world, my world of passion and creation with a real destination. So when I moved to Finland, it was like all of that came together for me. I'd always associated nature and the kind of Nordic nature with freedom, and from always being interested in going outside camping and nature and the forest. For me, it was united also with music, because that was a time in my life when I got into extreme music and music in general. So it became a part of my life, and it's somewhere I've always sought to find. So when you find this, I call it like it's like a spiritual home, because it's where you can truly be yourself. When a person finds that place, I think then you naturally just your creative your sort of level of creative inspiration immediately goes up and goes through the roof. So it's for me, it's been a very important aspect in life, and a change of life as well, because I worked in the creative industry, but very much from a commercial standpoint, as a graphic designer, as a career. But when I moved to Finland, it was the beginning of me starting to sort of break the bonds with that and become an artist, sort of 100% of my time, and that's what I'm doing now. So I think it was an absolutely essential part of life to kind of find that place where I could really be everything I wanted to be in terms of being a creative artist.
Okay, a silly one, but one I have to ask. What was the biggest cultural shock when you moved to Finland? What shocked you the most?
I guess initially, maybe because I'm brought up, I was brought up a Catholic, and I was brought up in Great Britain. Probably their relaxed attitudes towards nudity, and it sounds really stupid now to talk about it, since I guess I'm more Finnish in that way than I'm English anymore. But I think that was a very difficult thing to get past, because if you talk with most British people, they're not really comfortable being naked with strangers. And it's definitely a conversation with British friends and family about the sauna culture here in Finland, and how you can be naked even with your friends, which is a strange thing, but that's something Victorian Britain kind of did. And so that was probably the first, going to a party and suddenly you meet a bunch of people that are your partner's friends, or there's strangers there, and you're all suddenly getting naked and going into the sauna. It was very, very difficult to get past that. And yeah, it's a funny thing to think of now, and it's a funny thing that there are these different cultural barriers, but that's just it's just how it is.
Yeah, being Polish, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back a bit. What was the? How did Hexvessel start in the first place?
Hexvessel started after I left Dödheimsgard and Code. I guess I was still kind of involved a little bit, but I was leaving those behind. I was also moving to Finland, new life change. So I moved over here and I got married, and I wanted to work on something that was very different from my black metal bands. I wanted to do something that was very non band. It was just a solo venture. So it started like that, and it also started that it was a reaction. I think I'm a very reactionary artist, in that I'm always reacting off or from whatever else I've been doing. So it propelled me to from black metal to folk. It's music that I'd always been interested in and always been listening to, and I think I was interested in trying to find the extremities and trying to find the darkness and the light through other kinds of sounds and music. And I thought this would be the most freeing thing to do, would be to get away from kind of the metal standards that I've been frustrated with. Looking back on it now, I think I was frustrated because I was just in other people's bands, but I didn't know that then. I think I needed something quite extreme, an extreme break to kind of understand who I was, and I had never really written music before. I'd only written like vocal lines, melodies and things like that. I was pretty, good at that, but I didn't know how to kind of write music from the get-go. So I think that's how it sort of came about. Was then the move to Finland 2009, and then I think we got a band together with it in about 2011. I started to mix with the guys from Dark Buddha Rising from Tampere, and I traveled up to Tampere quite a bit to have them. They were kind of like the backing band, most of the bands, and then we brought on some other guys, and the band version of Hexvessel formulated then, and sort of took its own course since then.
Yeah, and you kind of did a full circle.
Yeah, full circle is a good way to describe it. Yeah.
While I was listening to Sapphire Zephyr, like the beginning, I was kind of shocked because it sounded like a perfect brainchild of Burzum and early Dark Throne. And I was wondering, what were your main influences in black metal?
When we were getting into black metal in the early 90s, for me it didn't feel like it was so designated to Norway. It was very much more an international movement, I felt. And it's difficult because now I go back and I look at the years and I realize that actually, the Norwegian stuff was very like how should I say, it was like sort of ahead of its time, but it felt like at the time like it wasn't all about Norway. There was I was very interested in what was happening with the Finnish scene, so I was very interested in Beherit and Unholy, and the bands that were coming out of Finland, Impaled Nazarene as well.
Yeah, they're so ridiculous. I mean, I love Impaled Nazarene because they're so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, and the first album is absolutely incredible. It's a really amazing piece of work. It's a terrifying record, especially when you listen to it as a young teenager who was at a Catholic school. This was really rebellious stuff. So I was very influenced by that. I was very influenced by the atmosphere of Unholy and the atmosphere of Beherit. So I didn't. It wasn't until later, obviously, Norway sort of took over as the main kind of trend, because they were so strong with the whole visual element and the whole kind of capturing and coining the whole genre. But if I think back on it, it was just, Rotting Christ and bands like that were, for me, kind of just as essential, and Absu and things like that. It felt like a very international thing. And so, but of course, I'm influenced by early Dark Throne and Burzum as well, Burzum's music, and that the atmosphere of that, but also the themes, I think, are very, very essential to what Hexvessel is all about as well.
And what's your take on modern black metal, like things like black gaze, like Alcest, for instance, stuff like that?
I mean, we toured with Alcest, and I think that I have a very similar outlook on music to Niege, and we are very much sort of, we come from the same place, I think, with our spiritual outlook on music and stuff. It's just that we, create different kind of music. I guess now what we're doing with Hexvessel is more in common with what Alcest has been doing than when we toured with them. We were sort of in this, I don't know, psychedelic rock phase at that time. but very much sort of when you think about where we're coming from creatively and spiritual, I think we're really from the same place. I have a lot of admiration for what they do, even though I feel like there's a lot of differences musically. And so I don't really keep up with what's going on nowadays. Not because I'm not interested, I am, but there's so much music out there that I'm interested in listening to. And I guess for me, black metal made such an impact at a certain time. It's very difficult for me to find music which gives me that same feeling of that I got back then. But my wife is probably more into black metal than me in terms of checking out current bands. So she often introduces me to different new things. And there was an album by a band called Blood Obsession that I thought was very good. So now and again, albums come along where it's like, okay, this is great. Even though it's modern, it's great. So I'm not against it. I'm just probably not the person to ask for what's the latest cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking because I personally enjoy the variety. Like the first time I thought black metal started being hip was when I saw Toro et Moi, that pop artist, actually wearing a Burzum t-shirt. So that was the point where I kind of understood that, okay, it's not, elitistic. It's not, underground anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the genre itself has become such a sort of a cultural fashion thing that it's difficult to discuss it. Even it feels like there's many aspects of that music that it's very difficult to understand. And I think you can really relate it to punk in that way that something has a punk aesthetic, but you're not really talking about punk, the real music of the certain time that it was important as a music, a moment in music history. That isn't anything to do with what punk is as a sort of fashion theme. So I think it's the same with black metal now, and I think people who are involved in the early part of black metal sort of have to understand that it's kind of out of their hands. It's now become sort of a part of fashion and a part of modern culture that might not have anything to do with the original movement. And I think that's why it gets very difficult to talk about it in terms of to really understand it in terms of what those people were about in the beginning versus kind of where people are at sort of culturally and kind of like politically these days. It doesn't really marry together, when you think about those albums and their point, and modern politics. And that's why obviously there's so much kind of what would you say, sort of reaction from both sides, from people who are feeling that they want black metal to be about something else. And you can only stretch something so far before it becomes something completely different. So it's a difficult subject. It's a very big subject now.
Yeah, and people been romanticizing black metal for ages now, and there's something like takes you back to early romantic literature, like being alone in the forest, the sheer loneliness. Would you say that's a common denominator between black metal and folk music?
Um, there's there's some differences, I think, in that folk music, just even the name is about people, it's stories, it's about the land and the community. So there's a lot of the big aspect in folk is sort of telling your story, and it's a kind of the singular to the plural, like the kind of the story of one person, but it's the story of everyone. I think black metal is a little different in that it's very much a kind of singular story, but it's not even a story. But it's I think for me, if I'm sort of to capture the essence of what black metal is about, for me, it's very much nature mysticism. nature mysticism in a satanic way. If you think about what Christianity abhors, so it's sort of everything that Christianity isn't. But I think of it in a very paganistic way, in that it's a celebration and an indulgence in the nature, and I think that's what it's always been and represented for me. And you think about the covers, even the cover of Burzum, it's a lonely person. It's in a decrepit forest, and the same in Under a Funeral Moon. And so what that says, it's sort of like the lone person going out into nature and really discovering its true self. So I think there's a sort of lot of self-discovery in black metal, and about that time as well, it was a lot of teenage kids kind of finding themselves and discovering literature and discovering art and so on. And I think it was a very, if you think of it in one sense, it was actually a really optimistic form of music, because it brought a lot of people up into reading, writing. They were writing letters, and I got into literature through that. For sure, it was promoting kind of bettering yourself as an individual. The elitism aspect of it was actually really beneficial at a time when you probably could have gone another way, and definitely in a sort of the difference with that and punk, for example. It was very much about making yourself the best you can be.
What about neo-folk? I mean, it's still folk, but it seems more solipsistic than regular folk.
Yeah, I I mean, the thing about neo-folk is a bit sort of I like the amateur aspect of it, that it was very down to earth, homemade, and all about just playing with what you have, singing with what you have, and being proud of that. And there's something really beautiful about that when someone sings and they don't care that they're keeping in tune. Yeah, it's very, I mean, that's just real folk. But there's sort of, I don't like when genres start to have these kind of rules, and neo-folk is sort of has these rules of you can't sing in tune too much, or you can't have your recordings too hi-fi, or so on, and then the sort of martial aspects of things that have to be there. I think it gets a bit silly, and it's maybe limiting, and I think that genre kind of limits itself in the same way that you sort of have limits on certain subgenres, psychobilly, and psychedelic trance. I think I fit neo-folk into kind of like the same arena as those subgenres of being just sort of like a very limited bubble, because as soon as it gets good, it's just folk, or it gets pop or whatever. There's plenty of really overground pop music, which in a lot of aspects is really just you could say it's quite neo-folk sounding. So I don't know really what my point was there, but I guess I think that really good neo-folk I don't actually think of as neo-folk. It's just good music, and then really bad kind of by the numbers neo-folk I wouldn't listen to, and but I think that for the political stuff involved in it, at a certain time, I think those things were interesting artistically. I think when there's no artistic merit to it, then it's kind of redundant. So that's also a little troubling, when it feels like it's just teenagers who've picked it up who think that it's kind of rebellious to mess around with dressing like an SS guy or something like that. It's a very far cry from when Boyd Rice was doing that back in the 80s.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's either you bend your genre bending,
Yes.
or you're trying to be more death in tune than Douglas is.
Exactly. Yeah, you said it kind of in a much more succinct way. That you got to figure that out.
Okay, so what about the artwork? I mean, you're really distancing yourself from, the blue dark stronghold type of black metal covers, or corpse paint stuff. Is there a common theme, like a story you are telling with the covers?
I've always admired covers that make you dream and give you a sense of something else, another world, and I like that about the Kittelsen artwork that Burzum used, for example, to pick a very cliche example, but it's the idea of there being something beyond, and I think a lot of times these covers that bands go for, they're very explicit, and they kind of give you too much, and it's the same thing with the music for me. I don't want everything to be described, like all the solos, all the fucking uh, drum rolls and everything that sort of you elaborate the music so much there's nothing left to the imagination. So I want music and artwork that leaves a lot to the imagination, and I think Benjamin Sperber, illustration that did our covers, he understands that massively. Like his artwork is all about creating this sense of atmosphere, and he has this sort of folk tale feeling. Like it's very reminiscent of the Swedish folk tale illustrations of artists that were drawing the fairies and things like that. So I like that there's a kind of light aspect to it as well, because that's very Hexvessel. And if you're going to see Hexvessel doing a black metal influenced record, then I think Sperber is the perfect, illustration style for that. It definitely has this folk tale aspect, and that's coming from our folk influence as well. So I wanted the two albums to have very similar artworks, because I wanted them to be two chapters of the same book. And I want people to understand that it's the same story. It's just that the story has moved on a little bit, or you're opening the book and you're getting deeper into the chapters, and next comes the chapter about Nocturne, the night in that wilderness, the polar wilderness. So that was the idea, and I think that it's really important for me to leave a lot to the imagination. Then you will understand kind of the music a bit easier, I think.
So polar day and night. Are there any chapters to come? Like,
I guess polar veil wasn't really polar day, but it's like the polar veil is kind of like when you get through. If you live in the Arctic, you kind of it's like you go through the veil, and you're then at one. You understand where you live, and you're sort of at peace with the winter. When people ask you how's the weather, like can you deal with it, the darkness and the cold. I think if you've really been through it, and you're at peace with living there, then of course it's not a problem. You don't even think about it. It's just a necessary aspect of your cycle. So I think that's what polar veil is. It's the necessary aspect of the climate of the cycle of where you live. So it's like a destination, it's an area, it's a place that you live in, not just geographically but also spiritually. So that's what polar veil is. And then Nocturne is a night within that realm, when you go through the night in that realm. So I think it's endless in what you could use. It's not like I'm going to have every album is going to be a different aspect of the nature, but you could do that, because it's kind of endless, and every little part of the nature can be related back to the whole. So night, for example, when you go through the night, it's what happens to the changes in you. You can measure those changes scientifically, changes in brain chemistry, that you've gone through something. It's a threshold experience, and those things are very essential to ritual experience. It's a change, it's a transformation. And so what that says to me is that that's like we are pagan instinctively, intrinsically. We are pagan. We are, by nature, because we are drawn to this experience of going through a threshold thing, of being ritualistic almost by design, by default. And I think that's an important aspect for Hexvessel's message. is that we, I want to show that your connection with the natural world isn't just a choice. It's not just a choice like getting into Christianity. It's actually part of who you are. So that's the idea.
Well, I have no idea whether I would be able to cope with, like stuff like that. I mean, being that far north. I hate winters as they are in Poland. They're pretty harsh, but that's nothing compared to Finland, I guess.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's it's apples and oranges. It's like whatever floats your boat, really. I think the world's a big enough place. People can choose where they want to be.
Well, that's true. What about the whole creative process? I mean, Hexvessel is your band. Grave Pleasures is more like a group effort. What's the difference between, like writing songs for either?
Um, I don't know if there's a real difference. Only just in how it feels to me. But writing, I guess, creatively is kind of it's a free space for me. I'm not really sitting down and thinking like, okay, now I'm going to write Hexvessel. Now I'm going to write Grave Pleasures. It just comes about from different impulses and influences and things that I've been doing. And it's not until the work sort of takes shape that the work tells me what it needs to be. So it's a kind of, I get the idea once things have been forming, of where it's going to end up. But I definitely don't sit down and decide or try to do something one way or the other. It just comes about. But it's pretty similar way of working, I suppose. But there are very many different methods of writing. So it's one one day I will be working from something that's in my head. One day I'm working from I've been humming into the voice recorder. Another day I'll be working by playing on the guitar, and then things come about. So that there's many different ways. Or you listen to a piece of music, a Duran Duran song, and you're sort of you get inspired that way. You might just be a chord change. Something about Plague Boys with Grave Pleasures, for example, that I was very inspired by listening to. I was listening to 80s pop songs that were on the radio, and I realized that a lot of them are kind of major minor. So that the song will be major, and then the vocals kind of play with the minor, and it gives a very weird feeling of being kind of like you're floating but sinking at the same time. And I think with a lot of these themes, such as the kind of nuclear fear, it is that feeling of you don't want to give in to the fear so much that it affects your life. Otherwise you don't what do we have left? So we have to keep our joy, but we're also living in terror. It's a really complex emotion that I wanted to. So that was just an idea, musically. How can I play with that musically and to reflect the same feeling of complex feelings of joy and also terror? So I think there's things like that, that you get interested in, that kind of inspire creative processes. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I found particularly interesting, like between Grave Pleasures and Hexvessel, is that Grave Pleasures deal with stuff like social anxiety, like atom fear, like perhaps it's even a tad political, while Hexvessel is like completely opposite direction. It's about escapism, and one person covering both is interesting, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a feeling of in Hexvessel that is optimistic, or trying to find the light a little more, and then Great Pleasures will be kind of humoristic in a lot of ways and playful. But I think this is a human being. We're sort of made of so much different stuff that it would be weird as an artist to just pick one aspect to write about. Same way as I think really of albums and artistic projects quite the same way as a director of movies. You have your general messages, but you're free to explore so many different stories and in such different ways. And I think the really cool thing is when you're into an artist and they're doing all these different projects is that you start to find the red threads, that basically symbolize who this person is. And I love that. It's a really enjoyable aspect of getting into art is when you start to see the artist's signature throughout different periods of, if it's painting or if photography or whatever, you start to understand that, oh, this person, always went back to these things that kind of put them together, make them who they are. So that's sort of what I'm about with Hexvessel. And I think people are starting to get it now. It took a while. It was like a few different albums where it's a bit perplexing, like what are they doing? Why are they doing this? But I think they understand that it's sort of it's a journey, and you can come along or you can just dip into certain parts of it. It's fine.
Well, the last one, the wood shack issue. I mean, did you record or write Nocturne in that log cabin you mentioned?
Yeah. I made a studio in a barn, and it's a pretty old barn. Don't know how old it is actually. It's probably pretty damn old. But huge logs and so on, and just kind of reclaiming it. That its only use has ever been a barn, but made a studio there, and it's quite isolated in that I can go there and I can be completely undisturbed, and work
Yeah,
on
complete
something.
immersion, right?
Yeah, it's a good immersion space to what I've been doing, and it's definitely like been the next step in evolving my artistic way of working. And I think you can hear that in the music. It's a lot more involved because I've been able to involve myself in things a bit more, but also been really good to do these things by hand. It sort of teaches you a lot, and I spent months in sort of renovating this place, and so you start to think about the traditional methods of building, and how to do something in an ecological way as well. I think this is it's a very kind of holistic process, and it contributes a lot to your artistic way of thinking as well. Kind of methods and ways of working which are really sort of beneficial when thinking about building. I think it's something that probably people in the old days used to know a lot about because they had to do it for survival. It was just you got to build your shack, man.
Okay, well, that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.